So today we're going to kick off a new series that we're calling Teach Us to Pray. And it's going to be all about prayer. I don't know how long we're going to be in this series for. We're just going to see where the Lord leads us and guides us. But I want you to think about, when was the last time that somebody taught you how to do something? When was the last time someone taught you how to do something? Maybe it was learning how to cook a dish, or maybe it was learning how to fix an appliance or something on your car. Maybe it was learning something on your phone that you didn't know before. And your 8-year-old grandchild said, "Nana, let me see that real quick." You go, "Oh, I never knew it could do that." Currently, we're teaching our oldest son how to drive. And so we're doing little lessons in the parking lot here and there. And so even this morning we pulled in and he was like, "Dad, can I drop you off at the church and can I take the car and go park it in the upper lot?" And I was like, "Yes, but I'm going to ride with you this first time." And he did a great job. He did very good. But do you remember how you felt that first time after learning how to do something? After learning how to do something you didn't know how to do before. A few years ago, a pastor friend of mine invited me on this weekend getaway up to the mountains with some other pastors, and we were just going to have a few days of rest and teaching and encouraging each other. And part of it, too, was we were going to go fly fishing. And I've never gone fly fishing before. Never. So we get there, like I have no idea what to expect. All I know is that it is different from any other type of fishing that I've ever done. And so we booked these guides and they take us onto the river. And so I'm with this one guide and like another pastor. And so we're in the water and he's showing us how to do it and everything. And he goes, "All right, now I've shown you, I've taught you, so now it's your turn. You go and do it." I was like, "Great." So I'm remembering the techniques and everything that he's taught. And so I bring that line over and I bring it around and I cast it and I'm watching it float down the current, down the stream. And all of a sudden that striker goes under. And so I do what he tells me and I yank it and I set it. And he's already walked down a few yards and I'm like, "Fish, over here, over here." He's like, "Are you serious?" Like, first cast, we were out there killing it. And it was so exciting. It was so exciting to be able to learn something new and then actually do it. And I don't know, maybe you're like me. I don't like to attempt new things without some instruction first. Some of you might be different. Like some of you are a shoot first, aim second type person. You're like, we'll figure it out as we go along. Me, I need instruction. I need manuals. I need a YouTube video at the very least. Like I'm a little gun shy to jump into something that I don't know how to do without being taught how to do it. And the thing is, I feel like that's true for a lot of Christians today when it comes to prayer. That if we're being honest, we don't really know how to do it. And it's because no one's really taught us how to do it. It's just kind of one of those assumed things. Well, if you're a Christian, then you know how to pray. And I feel like a lot of us, we get to this place in our faith where we've been a Christian for so long, we've gone to church for so long, we do all the other things, we don't know how to pray. And at this point, it's embarrassing to admit that we don't know how to pray. That would be like being my age and not know how to ride a bike. And like, I'm not gonna get out there with training wheels on, because that just looks ridiculous. So instead, I'd rather just go through my life not knowing how to ride a bike. I might pretend that I know how to ride a bike. I'll talk with you about your bike rides and everything, but I don't really know how to do it myself. And so that's going to be part of my goal in this series over the next few weeks. Part of my goal is this: to try to disarm your fears and insecurities when it comes to prayer, to equip you with some practices that will help you pray consistently and regularly. And I want to encourage you to help you see the power and the benefits of prayer and why prayer is such an important discipline when it comes to our Christian faith. And so before we get into all the hows of prayer, I want us to get into what prayer is. Like, we're going basic, we are going 101, we're going foundational this morning, okay? And so if you're taking notes this morning, the first thing you can write down is this. Number one, what is prayer? Prayer is talking with God. Prayer is talking with God. That is the simplest definition that I could come up with for you this morning. Prayer is talking with God. Now, I underlined the word with, and I used it intentionally. I did not say prayer is talking to God. Prayer is talking with God. Because I want you to think about a time that someone has talked to you or someone has talked at you. See, when we're talking to someone or at someone, it's a one-way conversation. And in fact, a one-way conversation isn't a conversation at all. It's a lecture, right? And how have you felt when someone has talked to you or at you? And they never stop talking to give you time to talk and to actually listen to what you have to say. That's why I say prayer is talking with God, because if we're being honest this morning, most of us approach prayer that way. We talk to God rather than with him. We rush in with a list of requests and demands for ourselves and our loved ones. We let him know all about our circumstances and situations that we need him to fix. We tell him our plans that we've already made without consulting him, and we just ask him to bless them. And then we leave the conversation without ever giving him a chance to speak or stop long enough to listen for what he might actually want to say. And the thing is, we've all been in conversations like that with other people, where they just rush in, they unload on us, and then they're like, great, see you later. And we're like, okay, nice chat. I'm doing well too. Glad you asked. And the interesting thing though is, like, if we'll create the space and the opportunity for God to speak, he actually will. He actually will. Do you realize that so much of the Old Testament, especially the early books, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, do you realize so much of it is God speaking to his people? He is basically answering prayers. This phrase, then the Lord said, that little phrase alone, it shows up 59 times across 5 books in the beginning of the Old Testament: Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. Most of it is to Moses. Some of it was to Aaron, and then some of it was to Joshua. What was that? That was God speaking to them through prayer. They were talking with God, not simply to God or at God, because they created space for him to speak. And again, that's why I say prayer is talking with God. It's how we communicate with him. And listen, communication involves both speaking and listening. Prayer is how we hear his voice. It's how we learn it. It's how we recognize it. It's how we become familiar with it. Back in the 1900s, we had these things called house phones. And they were fixed to a wall. And they had a cord. And depending on the length of the cord, you could go to virtually any room in the house to find privacy. And it was the craziest thing because, like, tons of people had this one number, and they would call it, and the phone would just ring, and anyone in the house could go and pick it up. And this was the crazier thing. You had no idea who was calling you. And like, we just answered the phone anyway. And you would pick up the phone and you'd say, hello. And if you grew up in a formal household, like they had a greeting, you would say, hello, Trubetsky residence, or hello, this is Matt speaking. And if you didn't, you just answered it and you were like, what? And if the person on the other end of the line recognized your voice, they would say, hey, it's me. And if you knew their voice, you would say, oh, hey, it's me. And we knew who was calling us simply based on the sound of their voice. Because we spoke with them. We learned to recognize their voice. We became familiar with it, that without them even saying their name, we knew who was speaking to us. As I got older and my voice began to change, a lot of people thought that I was my dad when I would answer the phone. And at this point, my dad had shifted careers from healthcare to pastoral ministry. And my dad dealt a lot with benevolence and pastoral counseling and stuff. And so I would pick up the phone and I would just say hello, like I wasn't good. Trubetsky residence, Matthew speaking. I didn't do any of that. I just, hello. And sometimes immediately they would launch in, oh my gosh, Pastor Paul, I'm so glad you're home. Listen, we've got an emergency here. Here's what's happening. And I would be like, ooh, this is not Pastor Paul. And I don't think I'm supposed to know what you're about to tell me. Let me go find him. We became familiar with the voices. And listen, my fear today is that most Christians don't know God's voice because they're not familiar with it. Because we haven't developed this practice and this discipline of prayer, of speaking with God and giving him that opportunity to speak to us. Do you remember the story of Samuel when he was a boy? This is in 1 Samuel chapter 3. Do you remember when Samuel is a boy and his mom drops him off at the tabernacle and now he's going to be raised by Eli the priest? And one night, Samuel's sleeping and God calls out to him. He says, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel thinks that it's Eli talking to him. Remember, this happens 3 times, and finally Eli realizes, hey, Samuel, this is actually the voice of God that you're hearing. So the next time he speaks, don't come to me, simply say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. But it's interesting, in verse 7 it says, now Samuel did not know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Samuel wasn't familiar with God's voice because he hadn't heard it yet. But then someone helped him realize, hey, what you're actually hearing is the voice of the Lord. And so from that day forward, Samuel became familiar with the voice of the Lord. It was the voice of the Lord that told Samuel, you're going to anoint Saul to be Israel's first king. It was the voice of the Lord that told Samuel, hey, I'm taking the kingdom away from Saul because of his disobedience. It was the voice of the Lord that told Samuel to anoint David to be the next king. Remember, even when he was about to anoint Eliab, Jesse's oldest son, David's oldest brother, to be the next king of Israel. Remember, it says Samuel took one look at it, and he said, surely this is the Lord's anointed. And the voice of the Lord spoke to Samuel and said, no, not this one. Do not consider his height or his appearance, for I've rejected him. For man looks on the outer appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Basically, the Lord said, no, we're not doing it the way we did last time with Saul. Samuel, you need to listen to my voice. You need to hear what I'm telling you. You see, just like in any other relationships we have, healthy communication between one another is foundational to a healthy relationship. Just in any other relationship you have in your life, with your spouse, with your kids, with your friends, with your coworkers, a healthy relationship, the foundation of it is healthy communication. Which is why when it comes to our relationship with God, we could say this: prayer is the foundation of our relationship with God. Prayer is the foundation. Listen, can I tell you this morning, your church Sunday morning attendance is not the foundation of your relationship with God. Your volunteering and your serving is not the foundation of your relationship with God. Your giving is not the foundation of your relationship with God. All of those things are important, and we encourage all of those things, but it is not the foundation of your relationship with God. I want you to think about a close relationship you have in your life. Maybe it's a best friend, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your kids. How close would your relationship be with that person if you never spoke with them? How close would your relationship be if you never spoke with them, if you never talked with them? How close would your relationship be if you never gave them a chance to talk and actually listened to what they had to say? How close would your relationship be if you only spoke to them when you're in trouble or you need something? All of us have someone like that in our lives, right? And we see their name pop up on our phone and we're like, voicemail. Wonder what they need now. Because that's the only time they ever call you, is when they need something. How close would your relationship be with that person if you only spoke with them on major holidays or once a week on Sundays? You see, we understand that this two-way communication of speaking and listening, we understand that's how we build strong, close, healthy relationships with other people. So then why would we think that it would be any different in our relationship with God? Look at Luke 5:16. It says, "But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer." But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. Jesus often got away from everyone, from the crowds, from the Pharisees, from the disciples, often got away so he could be alone with God for prayer. Listen, if Jesus, the Son of God, prioritized prayer in his life, to spend time alone with God, to talk with him, to share with him, to listen to him, how much more should we be prioritizing prayer and spending time with God in our lives? It's interesting too, when we look at the life and the ministry of Jesus, of all of his incredible teachings and all of his incredible miracles, all of that, everything he said and did came from prayer. Everything he said and did came from prayer, not just simply because he was the Son of God. Everything he said and did came from prayer. Let me show you. John 12:49, these are the words of Jesus. "I don't speak on my own authority. The Father who sent me has commanded me," look at this, "what to say and how to say it." The Father has commanded me what to say and how to say it. If you want to know what to say and most importantly, how to say it, if you want to speak on authority that is greater than your own, you need to pray. You need to pray. And listen, a lot of us, let's be honest, if we would pray first before we would speak, we would know a whole lot better what to say and how to say it, and then we wouldn't be praying for forgiveness after we said the wrong thing in the wrong way. So maybe we should start praying first. Lord, I got this big conversation. I got a delicate situation I need to approach. I need you to tell me what to say and how to say it. And then if we wait for him to speak and we don't say anything until he tells us what to say and how to say it, man, how much better would life be? Jesus understood this. Look at John 5:19. So Jesus explained, I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He does what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. Jesus said, listen, I'm just doing what I see my Father doing. What I see my Father doing in the spiritual, I'm just doing that now in the natural. If you want to see what God is doing and do what the Father is doing, pray. Pray. In about a month, Sarah and I will celebrate 18 years of marriage. And in fact, it was over this week we celebrated the anniversary of our very first date 20 years ago. We've been together 20 years. I know, and we're both so young. How is that possible? We're only 29. I don't know. But here's the thing. Our relationship and our communication didn't begin and end on our wedding day. Our relationship began as friends and then as a dating couple, and then we were engaged, and all of that took 3 years before we were actually married to one another. And listen, there was a lot of communication that led up to that built and strengthened the relationship. There was talking, there was sharing, there was listening, there was understanding. Then we got to our wedding day, and we committed our lives to one another, and guess what? The communication continued. We still kept communicating with one another, talking, sharing, listening, understanding. The relationship kept growing as we're navigating through these things that we've never gone through before, living together and learning how to share a space. I never lived with a woman before. This is something brand new. I was learning lots of things, like where to hang my towel and where not to put my socks, Shared responsibilities and navigating expectations, becoming parents for the first time together, leading this church and working together. Listen, working together requires communication. We know that God has wired us this way, okay? And we get the best responses when people find out, wait, y'all are married and you work together? They're like, I could never work with my spouse. I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. We can. We know it works for us. I know y'all too. Y'all two should not work together for the sake of your marriage. The communication has never stopped, and because of that, the relationship continues to grow and become stronger and better. Again, it would be ridiculous if the only time we spoke to one another was on our wedding day. Because again, what kind of marriage is that? What kind of marriage is that where we don't communicate to one another after our wedding day? And yet, a lot of us are guilty of that when it comes to our relationship with God. We prayed a prayer at one point, and we accepted Jesus into our hearts and the gift of salvation. That was kind of like the wedding day, that we came to the altar and we committed our lives to Jesus. But then it's almost as if we went back to our place and we told Jesus that he could go back to his. And we said, hey, listen, I'll call you if I need something. I'll probably see you once a week on Sunday mornings for an hour. We'll do holidays, we'll do Christmas and Easter together. But other than that, there's not going to be a whole lot of communication between us. And again, we would all agree this is no way to have a marriage relationship. But yet, for some reason, a lot of us are content to have a relationship with God this way. And again, if we're not communicating through prayer, if we're not talking, sharing, listening, seeking to understand, then we're not growing in our relationship. And again, that's not to say that there isn't a relationship there. But man, wouldn't you want the closest, most personal, intimate relationship with your Heavenly Father that you could possibly have? Listen, I'm telling you, the only way that happens is through prayer. Listen, just as healthy communication creates healthy and growing relationships, miscommunication, poor communication, or lack of communication will create an unhealthy relationship in any context. Because again, if you never talk to someone or rarely talk to someone, if you never listen to them, it's very difficult or nearly impossible to get to know them for who they really are. And this is what happens. When we have relationships like this, that we never speak, we never communicate, we never listen to the other person, this is what always happens. We make assumptions of what we think they're thinking and who they are. Because we've all been in scenarios like this where either we've been the person or we've been on the other side and someone is talking to us. And they're like, man, I just know so-and-so. I know they think this about me. I know they're angry about me. I know they were thinking this when they did that. And like, can you believe that they would have the nerve to do that? And we sit there and we listen politely. And then somewhere in the conversation, this question always comes up. Have you talked to them? Well, no, I haven't talked to them about it, but I know this is what they're thinking and this is why they did what they did and everything. Oh, okay. So you've talked to me and you've talked to everyone else, but you haven't talked to the one person that could probably help bring some clarity and understanding to all of this. See, our lack of communication has produced a false assumption of who they are and what they're thinking. And again, a lot of times we've done this with God. We do this with God. We don't pray, we don't communicate, we don't listen to Him, and therefore we create this false identity of who God is. Well, I just know God's angry with me. I just know He's disappointed with me. I just know He doesn't want anything to do with me. I just know. Have you talked to Him? Better yet, have you given Him space and opportunity and a chance to talk to you? Because I guarantee if you would, all of those false assumptions that you have about who He is and what He thinks about you would disappear. You see, a strong, close, personal, intimate relationship, it requires these three things. It requires honesty, openness, and transparency. If you're going to have a close, personal, intimate relationship with anyone, you've got to be honest with them. You've got to be open with them. You've got to be transparent with them. My question for us this morning is, do we actually pray to God that way? Do we actually pray to God that way? Are we honest, open, and transparent with Him? Or do we just pray to Him the way that we think He wants us to pray to Him? Can I just let you know something this morning? God can handle your honesty. He can handle your openness. He can handle your transparency. And again, when we remind ourselves that God already knows how you're feeling, then why wouldn't we just be honest with Him? Listen, if you're angry, tell God you're angry. He can handle it. If you're upset, if you're frustrated, if you're disappointed, if you're afraid, if you're nervous, if you're anxious, if you're worried, whatever it is that you're feeling, bring it to God honestly, openly, transparently. He can handle it. See, and here's what I have found. When I'm brave enough to pray those honest prayers to God, this is what I have found to be true in my life. God meets me in my honesty and in my vulnerability every single time. He meets me right there. And he doesn't meet me with a voice of judgment or condemnation and say, Matt, you shouldn't feel that way. Matt, you're not allowed to be angry. It's not very Christian to be angry, Matt. It's not very pastoral to be angry, Matt. Knock it off. No. He meets me with comfort and encouragement. He reminds me of who he is and his goodness. And listen, my situation may not immediately change. And in fact, can I just be honest with you? Most of the time it doesn't. But you know what does change? My perspective and my outlook. Because I'm no longer so laser focused on this problem. Now I've been able to step back and I can see, yeah, that's still true, that's still real. But you know what, God? So are you. So are you. And God, you're bigger than my problem. You're bigger than my issue. You're better than all of this trouble that I'm facing. Be honest with God. So we've talked about what prayer is. It's a conversation with God that, again, involves both speaking and listening, sharing honestly, openly, transparently with God, and doing it regularly so that we build and strengthen our relationship with God. And so this morning, I just want to give you a few practical hows that I believe can help you develop a consistent and regular prayer life that will increase your relationship with God. So, how do we approach prayer? How do we begin to approach prayer? Number one, schedule a time. Schedule a time. And I know this sounds basic and elementary, and for some of you, it even sounds weird. Like, why would I schedule a time to pray? Because you schedule everything else in your life. You schedule everything else in your life. Whatever is important to you, whatever is a priority to you, you schedule it. Listen, I live and die by the calendar in this phone. If it doesn't get put into the calendar, there is a 99% chance that I'm going to forget about it and it ain't gonna happen. We schedule what's important to us. The last 2 years, I've taken my boys on these weekend trips with our Jeep, and we're going off-road and trails and stuff. And listen, I had to put a reminder in my phone of when to register for the trip. Because if I don't do it at that time it opens, the trip sells out in less than an hour, and we're not going. And so this year I was at one of my son's basketball games and the timer went off, and I'm trying to watch and I'm registering and I'm watching and I'm registering, and we had to do it. Why? Because it's important. Because it's a priority. And so I scheduled it. Schedule a time that you can meet with God and pray. Listen, just in the same way that you would schedule a lunch meeting with a friend or coffee or a doctor's appointment or an important meeting at work that you cannot miss. Schedule a time. Find time in your schedule that is good for you to meet with God. Again, we make time for what is important to us. And so listen, if we're going to say that prayer is important to us, we need to start scheduling it in our day. We need to make it a priority. Second thing this morning, number two, how can we begin a lifestyle of prayer? Number two, come prepared. Come prepared. This is the other thing that I hear so often. Okay, I made time to pray. And then I got to my spot where I'm going to pray, and I sat down, and I went to get started, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And so come prepared. Listen, just as you would come prepared to any other meeting that you would schedule, come prepared to meet with God. And listen, let me just give you some basics of where you can start. Start by bringing God up to speed on what's been going on in your life lately. Especially if it's been a long time since you've prayed, treat it as if you're catching up with an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time. Well, let me bring you up to speed. Let me tell you everything that's been going on in my life lately. Share the highs and lows with him. Share your accomplishments and your victories. Share your failures and your defeats. Share with him how you're feeling. Think about it. How am I feeling right now? Tell God that. Share with him what you're excited about, what you're proud of. Share with him what you're anxious about, what you're worried about, what you're afraid of. Share with him your doubts and fears. Come with questions that you have. Come prepared. And then the last thing is this, number 3, listen. Listen. This is usually the part that a lot of us miss. And again, too, this is usually the part where we get frustrated and we kind of give up because we feel like, well, my prayers aren't working. And one of the reasons we feel that way is because we haven't even created time and space for God to speak to us so that we can listen to him and hear his voice. So even when you've come prepared with everything that you want to share with God, give him a turn to speak. Give him time and space to respond to everything that you have shared with him. Give him time and space to comfort you and encourage you, to give you wisdom, discernment, creativity, to lead you and to guide you, to give you answers to your questions. Listen, I can't tell you how many times I've prayed in this room, God, I need wisdom. God, I need creativity for what's next. God, I need to know what's next. God, I need you to lead me and guide me. And then I stop talking and I just sit and I listen. And I listen for his voice to actually speak to me. Give him time and space. I'm going to ask if you would to stand with me this morning as we wrap this up. There's an old proverb by an unknown author that says this: give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. Give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for a lifetime. And listen, as your pastor this morning, I feel this same way about prayer. I feel this same way about prayer. Listen, I will always pray with you and for you about anything and everything. And I want to equip you and encourage you and empower you to pray for yourself and to pray for the ones that you love. Listen, the reality is this: you and I, we have the same direct access to the same God, okay? He hears your prayers just as much as he hears mine. And listen, he's not looking for your prayers to sound perfect. I think that's where we get hung up so often. It's like, well, my prayers don't sound like the pastor's prayers. Well, listen, you don't pray on a microphone every week. Of course they're not going to. But listen, they don't have to. That's not what God is looking for. God is simply looking for honest prayers. Listen, like any good father, he just wants to spend time with his kids. I can remember when my kids were little and they would be trying to tell me things about how their day was going and what they were feeling and what they did and everything. And listen, the stories would be all over the place. And then he did this. Oh, and then we went to lunch. Oh, wait, I forgot this one part. And then back here. And listen, I didn't rebuke them or correct them and be like, listen, son, we need to work on your grammar and your public speaking skills, okay? Because this is just ridiculous. You're all over the place. No, what did I do? I sat there and I listened. And I was like, okay, and then what? What happened next? And then what? Really? No way. That's awesome. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. How did that make you feel? Like any good father, God just wants to hear from his kids. And we do that through prayer. He wants to know what's going on in your life. He wants to know what you're feeling. He wants to comfort and encourage you. He wants to help, to lead you and guide you. And so listen, quite simply, at the end of the day, prayer is just spending time with God. It's talking with him. It's sharing with him openly, honestly, transparently, and it's giving him the time and space to speak to us and to listen for his voice. I'm going to ask if you would to just bow your head and close your eyes this morning, because I want to give you a challenge and I want to give you an opportunity to respond this morning. Because I imagine there are many in here this morning that would say, you know what, Pastor Matt, I want to grow in my prayer life. I want to grow in this practice and discipline of prayer. Experts will say that it takes 21 days to develop a new habit, to get something to stick, to where it now becomes a part of your life. And so this is the challenge that I'd like to issue to you this morning. Would you commit to 21 days of prayer starting tomorrow? Would you commit to 21 days of prayer? I'm going to keep it real simple. Would you simply commit to 10 minutes a day? And I'm going to make it even simpler for you. Would you commit to 5 minutes of speaking and sharing, and then 5 minutes of just listening and waiting for God to speak, to hear his voice? If that's a challenge that you are willing to take on, something you would do, would you be so brave to raise your hand and look up at me today? Because I want to pray for you. Hands up all over this place. Hands up. Listen, I am believing that God is going to do incredible things, not just in your life personally, individually, but in your family, in your marriage, and in this church. Because we are committing to be a people of prayer first and foremost. So let me pray over us today. Father, thank you that you invite us into prayer. Lord, it is unfathomable that the God of the universe, the creator of all that is seen and unseen, would actually invite us into conversation and relationship with him. Lord, forgive us for forsaking the practice and the discipline of prayer. Forgive us for trying to build our relationship with you on anything other than prayer. And so, Lord, I pray over these next 21 days, Lord, that you would encourage us, that you would strengthen us, that you would discipline us, that we would find the time in our schedule to make prayer a priority. That we would no longer be afraid to pray to you openly and honestly, but we would come to you with our true selves, not the version that we think you want or need. And Lord, I pray that we would be brave enough to create the space to just sit and listen for the voice of our Heavenly Father. And Lord, I'm believing this, that when we do that, you will speak. We will hear your voice. We will begin to learn your voice, become familiar with it, and then able to recognize it. When you speak and you tell us, do this, go here, don't do that, speak to this person, that you then would show us what to say, how to say it, and what to do. Lord, may we, your family here at Harvest, be a people of prayer. And it's in Jesus' name we pray.